Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today we're going to talk about issue number 4 of Dead X-Men, written by Steve Fox. But before we dive into the story, I want to ask you a favor. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like and a comment to help the channel grow. Now this issue picks up right where the last one left off, as Moira emerges from a portal. So with the Cyborg ready for battle, both X-Men teams decided to focus their attention on the new threat. And the way they were going to deal with her was by having Dazzler sneak up behind her and hold her in place as Rachel snatches them through timelines. And just like that, Rachel did as she was told and sent the team alongside Moira, hurtling through reality. And while they were on said trip, Prodigy was able to experience all of Moira's lives as he went, all at once, absorbing everything. Now following that, we pick up in Rachel's mind while she's talking to Moira, and during their interaction Rachel admits that Moira has some pretty good psychic defenses, but it was nothing that she couldn't handle. And the best part about it was, she didn't have to be gentle because Moira's mind was already beyond broken to begin with, due to fighting for mutant kind over several lifetimes. Now at this point in the story, Rachel is done playing games, because she just found out that she has been lied to by none other than Charles, which in all honesty, should have been something she anticipated. Because Charles tricked her into helping him find a way back to a version of Moira's life where she is the most vulnerable. And once he was there, he was planning on taking her out. Now the reason why this is hitting Rachel so hard is not because Charles is planning on killing a young version of Moira, but rather because if the child version of Moira is killed, then so does everything her friends and she have ever known would disappear too. So because of that, Rachel states that she has no time to waste on a monster like her as she tossed Moira back into her original timeline. And once they get back to the Moira engine timeline, they pick up where that timeline left off. So as they descended from the sky, all parties crashed upon the ground. So with Moira now pissed off, she states, if they condemn her to the graveyard planet, then she'll take every mutant she sees with her to the grave. And the first person she goes for is Prodigy, but before she could hit him, Dazzler jumps in the way, taking the attack meant for him. So as the rest of the team rushed Moira, Prodigy went to Dazzler's aid as Orbis Stellaris appeared overhead. And with that going down, Orbis Stellaris used his technology to rip Prodigy from Dazzler's side in order to reclaim his crystal. So while that is happening, Moira is still heavily engaged with the rest of the team. And after a thunderous strike from Frenzy, Moira points out how Charles always sends his lackeys to beat up his old friends like Magneto. Now this comment didn't sit well with Cannonball, so in a fit of rage he dashed towards the crazed cyborg only to be swatted like a bug. So with another member down, Jubilee stepped up to the plate and launched an attack of her own. So with the blow dealt, Moira raised her axe above her head to launch another attack. So as the team braced themselves for another blow, Dazzler dug deep down and took aim, and fired a shot directly at Moira's head. So with the cyborg down, the team regrouped and the question on all of their minds was, where's Prodigy? So speaking of Prodigy, on the next page, we see Orbis Stellaris taking the Chron crystal from Prodigy's chest, before casting him back down to Earth. Now right before Prodigy crashed into the ground, Frenzy managed to catch him. So with the team together, they called for Rachel to pull them out as Orbis Stellaris attempted to ascend to Dominion Hood. But much like we already know, someone was already there, for his attempt failed. So with that transpiring, we see the wounded Moira trying to make her escape, as Abigail and Smasher are boarding their ship. So with the mutants making their escape, Juggernaut exited the Starjammer's craft to get his revenge on Moira for something that happened during their timeline. So with that timeline ending in a happy ending, we jump back over to Atlantic Krakoa in the White Hot Room. And when they get there, the whole place is completely destroyed. In fact, they compared it to being inside of a hurricane. Now, with that said, Rachel says she is sorry for the theatrics, but she's really ticked off right now because Charles played them all because he never intended to talk to Moira. He went back in time to kill her before her power manifested. Because in his arrogance he decided, all on his own, that their last chance against the Dominion was to prevent Krakoa from ever existing. So because of that, Rasputin 4 already went into the portal to try to stop him. And to make things worse, Sinister was inside Cypher's body all along. So long story short, if Charles accomplished his goals, then everything everyone ever knew would have never happened. For Charles made a lot of questionable calls in his days, but his dream, the promise of Krakoa, is bigger than him. And not to get all sentimental, but Jubilee had nothing and nobody until the X-Men gave her a family. And see, Jubilee was not the only one on Krakoa who felt like that, for there were many people just like her there. Now she gets that the odds are super bad, but no one person gets to decide something like this for every mutant. So following that, Frenzy admits that the threat of the Dominion is more than she can wrap her head around. But she followed Zealots before, as well as Apocalypse, Magneto, and Exodus, so there's a part of her that respects Charles for being ruthless enough to consider this plan, but Krakoa allowed her to change her story for good. And as for Cannonball, he points out that he has a kid of his own and he can never put himself in a position to consider killing Moira as a child. And on top of that, if Charles unraveled their timeline, then Izzy, his wife, and himself might never meet each other and have their child Josiah. So in the end, many lives might never be lived, and to make things worse, there is no guarantee that anything turns out better. And he is not about to risk his next life on a coin flip. And when it comes to Dazzler, she believes even if things turned out more or less the same way, Krakoa meant everything to so many people. But not to sound corny, she also understands the importance of a second act. Because on this island, mutants who had lost their powers could be whole again, and villains even have another chance at life and start anew. And that is when Prodigy chimes in by saying, he is the one who had to live with Moira's viewpoints in his head, and from his point of view, she is just as cold as Charles. For they both look at the big picture and don't care about the little people it takes to achieve their vision. So with that said, both Charles and Moira don't get that the big picture is nothing on its own. Because in the Moira engine timeline, a piece of the crystal got embedded in his chest. And while it was there, it unlocked his powers and told him the individual is a whole and every single person matters. And even if it's impossible, every life is worth fighting for. So with that said, Rachel tells Prodigy that Rock was the M'Kraan crystal, and that crystal is the nexus of reality itself, which means the whole white-hot room exists inside of it, and every fragment of the crystal is effectively the entirety of the crystal. For it doesn't subdivide because each individual is the whole. So when he bought the crystal through the defunct timelines and back inside of himself, he ended up creating a circuit. Now, this is important because Charles had 3 plans to stop the Dominion. The first plan failed, and the second was to murder Moira and undo Krakoa, and his third plan was a long shot. Because he wanted to manifest the Phoenix on a scale never accomplished before, so it was deemed impossible. But because Prodigy had the crystal bound to him throughout 10 lifetimes, he managed to experience and touch every individual ever. So with that said, they can potentially summon the strongest Phoenix ever. So with that huge achievement, the likelihood of pulling this off is still a long shot because they need Rachel's mom to make it work. So with that said, Prodigy returns to his feet and tells Rachel that she should know by now, the only thing the X-Men ever needs is a fighting chance. Which means they have to stop Charles now before he takes that away from them. So with this giant task set before them, Rachel uses her psychic ability to attempt to loop them into a giant conference call. Now this takes them to Moira's 10th life, right before Charles is about to pull the trigger. And during this interaction, Rachel states Charles may not need to explain anything to anyone. But someone wants to explain something to him. So before he does this, Rachel's team wants to talk to him about the dream and Krakoa. And more importantly, what it means to everyone and why he can't wipe it away. No matter what. So with that said, the final issue of Dead X-Men comes to an end.